Hello, my name is Monica Brown and I teach 8th grade U.S. History and Social Studies at Key Middle School. Today we're going to talk about the 13 colonies, but this time we're going to talk about how we map the colonies. For this lesson, you will have a pen or pencil and you will need to have some paper. If you like to write in your journal, you may also use that as well. Your learning targets today will be I can identify the regions and interpret maps in the 13 colonies. I can ask and answer questions about patterns of settlement in the colonies. I can explain how the physical characteristics of New England, Middle, and Southern regions influence economic activity. I can compare the physical and human characteristics of the New England, Middle, and Southern colonies. I can compare the reasons for the establishment of Jamestown and Plymouth, and I can analyze the effects of physical and human geographic factors on Jamestown and Plymouth settlements. Let's take a moment to look at some of the vocabulary we will be seeing today. Your first word is region. A region is an area that is set apart by cultural and physical features. If you remember from your 6th grade and 7th grade social studies classes, you might remember talking about regions. So even here in the state of Texas, we have divided our state into different regions to point out the physical features and the different cultures that apply to that area. For example, here in Texas, we have regions that are defined by, say, the Gulf coastal plains or the hill country. We divide those into specific areas because they have things in common. Your second word is cash crop. A cash crop is a crop that is grown by a farmer, not for his own use, but to be used for economic reasons. A cash crop is usually grown in order to generate income for the grower. Population distribution. Population distribution refers to a group of individuals that belong to the same species or live in the same area. Paddlement. Your next word is colony. Colony refers to a group of people that move to a new place, but they are ruled by another country. Puritans were a group of religious people that came here and settled in the area of Massachusetts. One of the things that was most important to them was to be able to worship freely, to have freedom of religion. Joint stock company. A joint stock company is basically a group that is made up of shareholders. And Virginia House of Burgesses. Virginia House of Burgesses is really one of the first signs of democracy in our new world. Some of the famous delegates included Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington. The House met for the first time in Jamestown way back in 1619. So let's look at our activity now. So here I have a chart that you see on the right, and I'm going to ask you to take a look at some of the characteristics here. We have location A and location B. Under each location, we can see jobs available, restaurants, sports team, parks, churches, government, and environment. This chart is telling us what each location has. Your goal is to pretend that you are living on your own. You know, things aren't going so well for you right now, and you've decided to move to another location. However, you do want to do some research on that place. Now, as you look at the chart on the right, what 3 criteria do you think are most important? Are you more interested in the jobs that are available? Maybe you are more interested in how many restaurants are in an area. How about sports teams or parks or government? How's the government run? Maybe that's important to you. Or what about the environment? What type of environment is in this location? I have provided a STEM for you. What I want you to do is tell me what location, A or B, would you move to? And then use your STEM to complete your sentence. I would move to location, okay, choose A or B, because, and I want you to fill in the blank. Tell me why you would move to that location. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to come up with your decision. Which place would you move to? Location A or location B? Okay, so now that you've had some time to look at the chart and decide which elements are most important to you if you were moving to a new place, how did you decide? So if we look at location A, there's some good things there. Location A has 500 restaurants, but they only have 50 jobs. So what's more important to you? The restaurants or having more availability to work? And then I see that location A also has 3 sports teams. So maybe combined with the restaurants, 3 sports teams, and looks like there's 25 parks and 100 churches. Maybe location A might satisfy you if you're looking for more social outlets. What about location B? Location B has 100 jobs available. That's pretty impressive. But they only have 5 restaurants. Not too many places to go out to eat, right? But no sports teams, but they have 50 parks. And the government of each place is a little bit different. Whereas location A has a religious leader as their part of their government, location B seems to have a mayor. So maybe you're more attracted to location B because you would prefer to have a mayor. Whichever way that you decided, it does show that when we move from place to place, that there are certain things that we're looking for, much like the people that came from Europe to the New World. They were looking for different opportunities. Comparing Jamestown and Plymouth, mapping the colonies. Okay, so let me ask you this. Where would you rather live? What would cause you to leave your home and move to a brand new world? Would you be looking for a new job? Or maybe you've heard of opportunities to become rich, finding gold perhaps? Maybe you had just been facing religious persecution and you were seeking a place where you could worship freely. Whatever the reason, it would have to be very important in order for you to leave everything that you have known your whole life and move away. We know that the early settlers to the Americas were in search of new opportunities, better quality of life, freedom of religion, economic stabilities, and religious tolerance. As they made their way to this new world, let's look at some of the obstacles they faced as they settled in Jamestown and Plymouth. The chart you will see will compare the two settlements, and you will have to determine which place had the most advantages. You will also look at the differences and similarities of each place. So let's take a look at this chart together. You will notice that at the top, there are 2 categories, Jamestown and Plymouth. So we have the 2 cities listed. On the side, on the left side, we have different categories that tell us what was going on in each of the settlements. So we know who settled there. It tells us what the goals were, what the geography was like in each one of those places, the difficulties that they faced in each place, and the relations that they had with Native Americans that were already there when they arrived. Next, we'll look at the economy of each place and what type of government that they had in both Jamestown and Plymouth. I want you to take a moment and look at this chart and compare the two. Which one would you have chosen if you were a new settler to one of these places? All right, so now that you've had a chance to look at each one of the settlements and you've had a chance to look at who settled there, what the goals were of the people that went there, the geography of each place, the difficulties that they faced, the relations that they had with the Native Americans that were already there, the economy of each place, and the government. Was each group governed? Perhaps you have chosen one over the other. If you were a settler during that time, which one would you have chosen? Well, let's look at Jamestown. So we know that in Jamestown, who settled there? We had 100 men and boys. There were slaves that were brought in from Africa, and there were women that settled there. In Plymouth, it looks like there were more families and members of the church that settled there. So that already tells you that they were looking for different things. The goals of each place. Well, in Jamestown, the goal was to find wealth, to make a profit. But in Plymouth, it looks like their goal was mainly to be able to worship freely. The geography of each place. It looks like Jamestown, they were on the coast. They had forest. They had freshwater streams with rivers, but they had hot summers and cold winters. In Plymouth, it looks like they were off of the Massachusetts coast. They had forests that were there. There was fishing available, but the soil was sandy and rocky. Cold winters and a short growing season. So if they had a short growing season, maybe farming wasn't that great. Both places suffered from a period of starving where there wasn't much food available. And then we can look at, let's jump down to the economy. In Jamestown, there was tobacco farming. And in Plymouth, it looks like they traded in lumber and furs. And one last one. Let's take a look at the government. Looks like they had a military leader at first and a representative government in Jamestown. And in Plymouth, it looks like they had self-government, and they basically pledged themselves to do the right thing. So which one did you choose? If you were an early settler, which one would have worked best for you? I'm sure that that is the question that many of the settlers had to ask themselves as they moved to this new world. So let me ask you, are there more similarities or differences in these two settlements? As we looked at the various categories and we compared which was most important, which one did you decide that you were going to move to? Well, as we read through about the different settlements, I want you to think about the differences and the similarities. Which one do you think you would choose? I'm going to read along and I would like for you to follow along with me. We're going to discover what was going on way back in the 1600s. By 1607, both Spain and France had colonies in North America. King James of England decided that he would support exploration and colonies in North America as well. He granted a charter, which is legal permission to the London Company to explore and settle the Atlantic coastal plains. He hoped to gain wealth from the colonies and also to keep Spain and France from getting more powerful. Let's take a look at Jamestown. The first permanent English settlement was Jamestown. Notice I've highlighted that because I thought that was important. And it was established in 1607. Jamestown was located on the Chesapeake Bay in what would become the colony of Virginia. About 100 men and boys came to Jamestown to find gold. They would work 6 days for the London Company, and one day they could work for themselves. Focusing on safety, they built their fort near a river and they named the James River. They believed that the site would offer protection against hostile Native Americans and Spaniards. But the marshy land was filled with mosquitoes and the water was brackish, brackish meaning a mixture of fresh and salt water. The colonists spent their time searching for gold instead of preparing for life in the wilderness. Many died of starvation and disease. The neighboring Indians taught the Jamestown settlers how to farm. The leadership of the settlement had imposed strict discipline requiring that everyone work if they wanted to eat. But by the winter of 1609 to 1610 was called the starving time. The people were unable to produce enough food. Out of 300 settlers, only 60 survived. Later, Jamestown was able to produce a cash crop. That was their first cash crop. And they were the first place to establish slavery in this new world. The enslavement of Africans began in 1619 when they were brought to Jamestown and forced to work on plantations. Same year, the colonists elected representatives to make choices for them or to make laws for them in the House of Burgesses. This was the first example of representative government in the English colonies. The available natural resources such as fertile soil and rivers allowed the colonists of Jamestown to make a profit and for the colony to prosper. All right, so it looks like Jamestown was more focused on economic opportunities and wealth. Let's take a look at Plymouth and let's see what the people who settled in Plymouth were looking for. Now in Plymouth in 1620, a very different group of settlers landed at Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and began the Plymouth settlement. We call this group the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims were part of a religious group called the Puritans that to separate or break away from the church or start their own church. At the time, it was law that everyone had to belong to the Church of England. The Pilgrims hoped that by moving to the New World, they would be able to worship freely. The London Company agreed to give the Pilgrims a ship and supplies. In return, the Pilgrims promised to send the company crops and animal furs for 7 years. About 100 men and women and children decided to leave England for the New World. They were supposed to sail to Virginia and settle close to Jamestown, but a storm blew the ship called the Mayflower off course. The ship landed in what is now called Massachusetts. Knowing that they were not where they were supposed to be, the men aboard the Mayflower knew they needed some kind of government to bring order to their new settlement. They agreed to govern themselves. They wrote and signed a pledge in a document known as the Mayflower Compact. As the Pilgrims went ashore, they began to build their settlement, Plymouth Plantation there, but nearly half died that first year. But the neighboring Wampanoag Indians befriended the Pilgrims and taught them how to survive. According to the Pilgrims' leader, William Bradford, an Indian named Squanto taught the Pilgrims how to grow corn, how to fish, how to pilot and bring them to unknown places for their profit. Right, so here we have our chart here. You know, there were a couple of things that brought my attention to the chart, and maybe there were some things that you were concerned about too. So if I look at Jamestown, well, I see that there were slaves that were brought to that community back in the 1600s. But if I look at Plymouth, well, there were just families that were there. So the fact that maybe Jamestown had slaves might make me think twice. And then if I look at the difficulties of each place, it looks like there was a lot of problems with growing enough food so that people would not starve. The third thing that got my attention was the relationships with the Native Americans that were already there. It looks like that the settlers did not return the Indians' hospitality in Jamestown. And it could be because they were so focused on making money. I don't know. What do you think? I'm going to give you a moment again to think about which one of these places would you have chosen if you were in the shoes of the settlers at that time. Okay, so now it's time to map the colonies. Let's see how each of these regions was divided based on their physical features. If you had to choose to work and live in a place, and again, this is what we're talking about, putting yourself in the shoes of the settlers to see which place would have worked better for you. So here's another chart for you to consider. If you had to choose one of these places, which one would you have chosen? Would have been location 1, location 2, or location 3. So location 1, it looks like cold winters, rocky soil, Atlantic Ocean, so there was a lot of coastline, fish, and forests. There were jobs available if you were a shipbuilder, a lumberjack, a fisherman, a whaler, a small farm owner, or boat captain. Location 2. Location 2 had a milder climate, so that might get your attention right away. Not as cold, good ports, rich soil, fresh water supply, and fewer trees. So the jobs available in location 2 were if you were a shipbuilder, lumberjack, fisherman, much like location 1, but looks like some extra here, cattle farmer, plantation owner, or a boat captain. And then let's go to location 3. Location 3 looks like they had rich soil. Rich soil usually means that's good for farming. Warm and humid climate, okay, that could be good. Coastal plains, large rivers, forests to the east. The jobs available there were plantation owner, river navigator, large farm owner. So if you had to choose one of these locations, which one would you choose? Which one would have worked best for you? We're going to now read a short passage about the environment and the economies of the 3 colonial regions, the New England, Middle, Southern Colonies. As we read, we will use the following to insert strategy if you are annotating while we are reading through. You can use G for geographic feature, or you can use E for economic activity. So if you decide to write down some notes on your paper, you would use G for geographic feature or E for economic activity. All right, let's see what's going on. Let's read about the New England colonies. The New England region included the colonies of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. In New England, farming was difficult because of the long, cold winters and climate. That means there was little to no rain and a short growing season, and the region's rocky soil. But the forest and the sea provided useful resources and ways to make a living. There was an abundance of whales and fish in New England. Deep harbors promoted fishing industry and trade. New Englanders built their economy on small farms and lumbering, fishing, shipbuilding, whaling, and trade. Okay, so that's New England. The Middle Colonies. Okay, the 4 Middle Colonies were New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. All right, so the landscape of this region ranged from rich soil and moderate temperatures of coastal New Jersey and Delaware to the cooler valleys and wooded mountains of New York and Pennsylvania. The milder climate provided the opportunity for farmers in the Middle Colonies to raise a variety of crops and livestock. Okay, that kind of appeals to me, milder temperatures. An interesting fact about the Middle Colonies was that wheat was the main crop grown, and this caused the region to be named the breadbasket of the colonies. Raising cattle was another important industry here. Deep harbors promoted trade and industry in port cities. Lumbering, fishing, and other occupations added to the many opportunities here. And now let's look at the Southern Colonies. The five Southern Colonies were Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. This region featured broad rivers and vast wetlands that gradually merged with the sea. The soil and the hot, wet, humid climate were ideal for growing cash crops such as tobacco, rice, and indigo. Remember that a cash crop was grown to be sold. It wasn't grown for the farmer's own use, but it was grown in order to generate income. The Southern colonies also had wealthy colonists that took advantage of these conditions by establishing plantations. Plantation owners relied on indentured servants and enslaved Africans to sow and harvest their fields. After being harvested, the crops could be brought by river to the coast and loaded on ships for transport to other colonies and to Europe. So I have several pictures that I would like for you to make an inference on. Based on what we've read, based on what you can see in the picture, I would like you to infer what you know. So let's look at this first one. I can infer this is the what region? Is it the New England region? Is it the middle region? Or is it the southern region? Okay, so based on what we've just read, I would like for you to complete this. I see, okay, so let's do this one together. I see, I see people in the fields. Looks like they are maybe working together. I can infer this is, so I'll have you to fill in the blank. And because what? Tell me why. I'll give you a moment to look at this photo and then we'll go on to the next. Here's your next photo. I see, so tell me what you see in this picture. I can infer this is the, which region is this? Is it the New England colonies? Is it the Middle Colonies? Or is it the Southern Colonies? Based on what you see, based on what we've read already, tell me, I see, I can infer this is the blank region because, and fill in the blank. Again, I will give you a moment to fill in the blank and we can go to our next picture. And here's our last one. I see, hey, what do you see in this picture? I can infer this is, which region do you think this is? Because, okay, tell me why you think it's the region that you've chosen. Okay, I have one more picture that I'd like you to look at. Looks like this is a picture that's a little bit different from the others that I showed you. I see, okay, so tell me what you see in this picture. I can infer this is the, okay, which region do you think this is? Based on what we've read, which one do you think this is? Is it the New England colonies, the Middle Colonies, or the Southern Colonies? Again, I'll give you a moment to decide. All right, so now we are at our independent practice. This is something I want you to do by yourself. And I would love for you to draw a map of the 13 colonies by sketching what you think a map of the 13 colonies would look like. You can create your own map or sketch of the original colonies. Draw and label features such as mountains and forests, rivers, etc. And also make sure that your map includes the three regions, New England, Middle, and Southern colonies. So today we have learned about the reasons that people move, the reasons that the settlers came to the New World, and we have looked at the different regions of the 13 colonies. Thank you so much for joining me with this lesson today. My name is Monica Brown. I teach 8th grade social studies at Key Middle School.